Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have Charey Fox here joining us today. And what are we going to do today? Tell us about healing the unhealable.
Yes, that's what we're doing. I have worked an awful lot with veterans, and there's a new understanding about PTSD that includes something called moral injury. And through the research with veterans, they're aware that there's this moral injury acts a little differently than PTSD. And I would say most of us would have moral injury. And most people feel that moral injury is unhealable.
Mm-hmm. And tell us, hold on, Charey, how do you heal? Tell us what you do. Need a little bit of your background. I know Charey already.
Well, how do I work? Do you want me to introduce myself?
Yes, tell us what you do.
I'm a coach, and I work with individuals, couples, teams on topics that are often very seemingly unhealable. I'll see those people that will have seen a counselor for years and years and years, and we have breakthroughs when I get together with them. Some people will say, I have worked on this for 20 years, and I have never, in one session or in a few sessions, I have never gotten to this place. So I can't promise anything, but pretty much most people are blown away at what they discover in themselves when I work with them.
Oh, and how can we contact you?
It's my name, ChareyKFox.com. My name is spelled ChareyKFox.com.
Perfect. And let's get started. Now, how do we heal the unhealable? Let's talk about this today. Where do we get started?
Yes. So this topic is called moral injury. And people have started to discover that it's not necessarily PTSD only, but when somebody's basic core ethical framework has been violated, whether they did it themselves, they witnessed other people that they loved and trusted doing something that's ethically wrong for them in the core of their being, they are very often perceiving it as unhealable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let me see. Again, it's first discovered around the work around veterans, where a veteran is ordered to do something that they later feel immense regret around. Or they witnessed somebody that they couldn't stop, something that they couldn't stop. And I would say that most people have an experience of that, maybe more in childhood, because your parents and or caretakers will do things that might be morally disruptive to you. And you have to just take the blame.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kids do. They just decide, it must be my fault that this has happened. Whether, say, a scenario where one parent is beating up on another parent, and the kid feels that they could have saved that other parent, or they could have stopped it, which would be impossible, of course. And in many, many situations, the moral injury has us blame ourselves for what we could have never done differently. Yeah, and moral injury is one of those things that it has people, what you'll see where they lose the capacity to be functional in life. You'll see that, a lot of homeless people will have lost that capacity to be functional in life. And or barely functional. So that's one of the signs, is that it's so crushing of somebody's internal confidence or spirit that they can't get out of bed, or they can't even care if they have a bed. It's really that big of a deal.
Impactful. Wow.
And like I said, I think that many of us in life find that we hit places like that we can barely look at, because we assume that it's unhealable. And we have no, in fact, we might even wish that it's unhealable. Like we, in a weird way, like, I will never forgive myself for this. That's one of those things that will happen in a person's brain. And when I work with someone, I start to unpack those unhealable wounds that seem impossible. And we can discover things like reality, that it would have been impossible to do something any differently, or that, yeah. So that, first of all, just the discovery of the reality of it, that we were in an impossible situation and it wouldn't have been our fault entirely. But the other piece that's there with moral injury is that we have to find a greater breakthrough into spirit, into our own sense of spirit or well-being, because that's what's lost in that.
Well, if you are just tuning in, Charey Fox here joining us live today on the Zoomcast and on the podcast. And really, we're talking about healing the unhealable. So it is possible. So for those out there listening today, hey, wait a second, they're going through a lot. It's possible, right? We also talked about the somatic and energy psychology techniques. You use a lot of these and your retreats to help people. Could you share a little bit of that background with us for new time listeners in regards to, what you also do overall with your wellness company?
Yes, I have, I don't know how many, 30 years of work with EFT and somatic work. And I have many years of something called voice dialogue, where people take a look at the different parts of them, and about 15 years facilitating something called systemic family constellation. And all of those are out of the box therapies, essentially. They are things that are game changers in people's lives. They're the things that nothing else could have touched. And they're also things that people, once they learn something, they can apply those tools on themselves. So it's you don't have to be addictively turning to a therapist. I have to let my dog out.
This is what we do. It's live television here. Don't worry about it. Charey K. Fox, ChareyKFox.com. She's an artist, educator, guide, consultant, coach, and she's here helping you. She can help you individually, as a couple, family, businesses, everyone, right? To break through, to really shift in a sense. I know we've talked about that, but she really wants to help people reach their full potential. And guess what? I just spilled coffee.
Oh no. Oh
See,
no.
see, you had your thing, and then I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, okay, so give me 1 second. I'm okay. Oh, I didn't turn my camera off. This fell on that. So maybe hold on. I did just spill coffee. See, it's all over my lap, but that's okay. Well,
and your laptop is not done.
It's not on the laptop. Oh, it's on my cell phone. It's okay. Oh, it's all over the phone. Hold on. So go back to what you were saying. So see what happens. This is live television. It's all the coffee's coming off the phone. Great.
Unhealable, and you're like, oh no, will my cell phone die? Oh no.
I'm more worried about my pants and my dress, but that's okay. We'll figure it out.
Will it survive? Yes. Will it ever make it through?
Don't mind me if I'm opening up my phone, making sure it doesn't get liquid in it. How's the dog?
So let me see. What else do I want to share while you're in the middle of that?
I know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that in scenarios where we have regrets, if we can look very cleanly at the regret that we have,
I
and
don't know what happened there. Maybe it did do something to the computer, right?
there's like
No,
a
the keyboard. No, it didn't get any liquid in the keyboard. I'm just checking. Go ahead, but it did just go off when I see it. Just I moved the keyboard and it went off the camera. I'm not touching anything. Oh, and by the way, I got your notes after the fact. They just sent them, and I saw that. I didn't know you didn't want to do a Zoom.
I was like, I look terrible.
You said that, but I'm like, no, you're fine. If you don't want to do, you didn't have to, but you look great. But I would have known. I would have shut the video off, and then you wouldn't have seen me spill coffee. It's all right.
What do you think? Do you think we should keep going, or should we?
I think so. Yes. Ready.
All right. Okay, great. So, when a person can look cleanly at a situation and start to recognize that it's not entirely their total responsibility, that they may over owning for a parent or say the military machine or whatnot, then that will begin the process of creating freedom. And there's more. Very often you have to actually commit to something. For instance, if you feel that a tragedy happened to someone and in part it is your fault or you're blaming yourself, then one of the things that, once we work through the trauma, we work through with tapping, we work through with patterns, we see how a pattern could have unfolded. We look at a whole situation and we really glean so much of the whole situation, even as a teaching. Then there's a strong commitment. For instance, if somebody has been hurt in some way or they die as a result of something that we accidentally did or were part of, or if somebody suffered in some way, then when we think of them, typically we're haunted by it. So it's hard to function. But if you use that every time you think of that person, every time you feel into or remember that situation, you make a strong commitment. It make a beautiful new reality out of it. Say somebody was hurt, you go, when I think of you, when I remember you, I don't just hate myself. I instead feel I feel blessed to be alive, or I feel I commit to making the world a better place, or I trust. It's a whole reality, and it's hard for me to explain unless I had a specific situation that I could describe. And some of those situations are kind of too hard for me to bring to this topic because I don't want people triggered by the topics, but will have something in their life that, and many people, it'll be shattering for them and their confidence. And I would say that it may be epidemic that people, that they don't have, nobody has the tools. There's lots of tools, but what tools do we have to use?
Interesting. Fascinated by this, Charey. I want to hear, could you share some people that you've worked with and kind of had this whole experience and
Let's see, how can I share
healing journey?
I would say that a friend of mine some years ago committed suicide. And I was ready to blame myself for not being there for them, for being too busy, for not answering calls, for just being, not being able to help them, not being able to the level of suffering that they were in. And that would be one of those topics. And knowing what I know, I actually went to some of the group experiences that people were having, and I implanted the idea of honoring them by living life. This person is very special, very creative, very amazing. And I basically had people say, in honor of you, I find my way in life and enjoy life to the fullest. In honor of you, I get the help I need. In honor of you and you passing. So it's like people had a big healing just implanting that at the time of this person's celebration of life, so that they could start to wrap their heads around a different way of thinking rather than just blaming themselves. Because most people blamed themselves for missing it or for not being able to do anything about it.
Interesting.
And that's just one thing I do, but essentially something to begin to change. I'll give you another scenario that I've worked with a couple of veterans that have had their whole platoon in Vietnam die, and they were the only person left. And they punished themselves for 40 years as a result of this, because they didn't end up being in that particular place. They were off work at that time, or they switched with somebody to be on guard. So they can't help but not want to live. Buddies, to feel regret. So in both of those situations, we looked again cleanly at the whole scenario, that they couldn't have controlled anything. In fact, they had a life, and they went on and they had children, and they did beautiful things in their life. But we also worked to the place where they looked at they looked and they honored the fact that they had lived. And so they live in honor of their buddies. They live and celebrate life. Instead of taking you with me and haunting my everyday with regret, instead take you with me and live to the fullest. I take you with me in my heart to have incredible life, to do incredible things, to serve in other ways. And so that's a game changer in one of those scenarios.
And Charey, now if someone comes to you, like, how do you know what they need, in a sense, right?
Well, how do I know what they need? Usually I start communicating with them and they share. And generally I get immediate impressions about if there's one of these regrets in their space, or I get immediate impressions about if there's dynamics in their family system, whether they're talking about it or not. If there's an entanglement with an unhealthy pattern in childhood, or some mysterious thing that seems to happen to everybody's health or everybody's money in a family that runs down the line. And so I'll just start to notice that and start to ask a few questions, maybe that seem out of the ordinary, not a traditional therapy approach. But how do you feel about that? How did that make you feel? Or I won't necessarily do that. I'll just start to observe patterns and get them to pay attention to the patterns. What was like this? when did this begin? Did something happen that you can't even identify with? To the point of, there's nothing wrong, but this one woman, she's 40 something, and there's a mistrust in her father. There's some separation with her father, and there was nothing observably wrong until we discovered that the puppy that was adopted exactly at the same time that she was born had to be given away, and it was a dynamic with dad, and that she identified with the puppy in the household. And when dad gave away puppy, and see, this is not cognitively available. It's not something that a child will even remember. It wasn't something that was well thought out. And all of a sudden, we're discovering that that some piece of her that was identified with puppy is being given away by dad. And there's a resentment left, like, ongoingly. And so then once you discover it, you can make adjustments in your thinking.
Right. Well, we have just 2 minutes left of the show, Charey. It goes so fast. What else did you want to add? My goodness.
I guess that's it. There's all these different ways, and even if I'm talking about things that are really, really hard and seemingly impossible to heal, generally my clients experience so much joy. There's so much freedom and joy that starts to happen. There's so much buoyancy, and I'm not exactly sure what it is about that happens, but there's like a field of lightness and love that starts to unfold, so that people are looking at these deep and painful and seemingly impossible situations, but they're feeling bathed in maybe a remembrance of who they really are at the same time. That is what I say is the secret to my success with people.
Well, thank you. And if we want to reach out to help heal the unhealable, Charey, how do we do that?
It is my website, ChareyKFox.com, ChareyKFox.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here. Great seeing you today. Good luck feeling better with those allergies, okay? You look great. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day to all of our listeners. Please stay tuned. There'll be more coming right up. Thanks again.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.